Namaste. One of the biggest challenges in this life is how to make choices. The Gita is the gospel of Karma Yoga ever given to man, the best gospel of Karma Yoga. But still, choices are not always easy if you are not too selfish. For a selfish man, there are no choices except looking after one's own interest. But it's only when you begin to wonder, think, discern what is really right, what is wrong, what is good, not only for oneself. We all, as we develop, we want that whatever our action is should, even if we know it is good for us, we don't want its repercussions to be, bad on others. In the sense, it should not create pain, bring pain and suffering on others. So as humanity evolves, it begins to become sensitive through a kind of sympathy about everyone around. And this sympathy, its seat is in the soul, actually. Sri Aurobindo speaks about the little sympathy we have for others comes from the soul. So because it's a sign of the development of the soul. So that's when the problem of action arises. The problem of action is not there at the two poles. Selfish man has no problem of action. He acts according to what he wants, and that's the end of the story. Wants in the sense of his immediate interest. And the God or the godlike living in intuition has no problem because one sees what is to be done and does it. But the problem is for the many Arjunas who are caught in between. Arjuna is a typical Rajo-sattvic person. So he knows what is his dharma, but still he doesn't know whether I should do it or not because it will have repercussions. So in this prayer of the mother, March 23rd, 1914, we see yet another angle through which the mother reveals to us how to act, how to make choices. There are several prayers, a series of prayers where she takes up this problem. This one takes it from many sides and ultimately gives us the solution as to how we should do and what, as per our human state. So it starts with, as I see it, the ideal state is that in which constantly conscious with thy consciousness, one knows at every moment, spontaneously, without any reflection being necessary, exactly what should be done to best express thy law. So that is the best state, highest, where Arjuna has realized the Krishna within him and he is completely governed by that. Then there is no question of any thought, reflection, because you know it is the divine will and you act according to that. And then the divine takes all the consequences, repercussions, because your goal is only to fulfill that will. That state I know. She knows that state. For I have experienced it at certain moments. But very often the knowledge of the how is veiled by a mist of ignorance, and one must call in reflection, which is not always a good counselor. So you may know that this is to be done. But how is it to be done? Let's take an example. Sri Ramakrishna says in a bit with a touch of irony and divine irony. He says God laughs when a physician tells somebody that he'll be all right, but God has decided to take away this person. At the same time, another he says when a person says, oh, they'll be happily married ever after, and God has already foreseen that this is not going to work out. Now, obviously, if one is identified with the God consciousness, one knows. One knows, for example, that a patient is going to leave the body and it's best to leave the body. But what should you do as a doctor? How to facilitate that process? Should you just say, well, this is God's will, I'm not going to do anything? Or should you give some medication? Or should you create an environment conducive to leaving? So all this is where reflection comes in. Even when you know that this is the will, we don't know how exactly to do it. Arjuna knows it is the will of Krishna to destroy all the arrogant Kshatriyas. He knows it because Shri Krishna has shown him. And yet there are moments, Bhishma will go, he knows it. How to actually end up, to see Bhishma fall. He knows that Drona and Karna must go, but how to do it? That's where the Second level of dilemma comes in. So she says that we normally call in reflection, but not a good counselor. Why? Because it lives in a mist of ignorance. Let alone all that one does at every instant without having any time for reflection. On the spur of the moment, we don't even have many times on occasion. There are several occasions when somebody says something to us and we respond. Hardly there is a time for reflection. We have to act. There is a decision to be taken and we have to act. So there are a number of such instances. How far does it conform with or oppose thy law? Take for instance that a person is sick, elderly. Should you take to a hospital where possibly he may be put on ventilator, possibly he may survive, which may not be a very good life, or possibly he may recover completely, or possibly he may die. There's so many things, but there is no time. You have to decide fast. So what do? You act. You don't have time to really reflect and go by that inner will. So how far does it conform with or oppose thy law? That depends upon the state of the subconscient, on what is active in it at that time. So whatever we are doing, whether it's in conformity with the divine will or opposed to it, depends upon what is active in us. For instance, there is extreme attachment. Now this is a state of the subconscient. One is extremely attached. So the decision one will take will be in all likelihood opposed to the divine will. Because it is attachment which is deciding. On the other hand, at a given point of time, one may be in the state that, well, whatever is best for the person, let that happen. So the decision will be very different. So it depends on the state of the subconscient, whether we are in conformity with the divine will or not. Once the deed is done, if it has any importance, if one can look at it, analyze it, understand it, it serves as a lesson. Generally speaking, once a thing is done, it's not good to go back to it. Some people go back to it and feel unhappy, they lament, etc. Sometimes they praise themselves. So it's not good to go back. It's a kind of egoistic activity. But sometimes we need to learn a lesson. So she's saying that after the deed is done, one looks back and learns and grows. Understand it, it serves as a lesson, enables one to become aware of one's motive of action, and hence of something in the subconscient which still governs the being and has to be mastered. This is so common that one has done something or, entered into something. And then one sees that, the spontaneous thing is that the mind gives a very suitable justification. And we enter into something. And it keeps on giving that justification, and the divine keeps on bringing the experience again and again till we have learned. There's a very nice little story once our Chaman Lalji told me during a trip to South Africa. He told something, because I used to have this dilemma, should I go out and talk or I shouldn't talk, and this used to go on, and despite several experiences that yes, you should, this work given to you, still because your mind can fool you, it can trick you, it can give you a explanation which is very, suiting your own wishes and desires. So he told me that day, very interesting story, that he was invited to the I think World Solar Conference to the US, so probably someplace outside. And he asked the mother, should I go or should I not go? So mother asked, what do you want? So, see, mother's way of making us conscious. What do you want? He said, mother, I don't want to go. But if you want me to go, I'll go. Mother said, are you sure? So his reply was very interesting. He said, mother, as far as I can be conscious, I'm sure. But I don't know. There may be things hidden in my subconscious which I don't know. Then the mother said, no, you should go, because if you don't go, somebody else will represent. So I want you to go. Now, in this whole process, she makes us conscious. There are several instances like that. One is where somebody asked about illness. Sadashiv, he was in marveling group. So he had an illness and he was advised operation, surgery, tuberculosis of the spine. That you have to drain the abscess and then whatever medicines were available that time. So he asked the mother. Mother said, "Do as you please." He said, "I don't know what shall I do?" So he took second opinion, because do as you please. So he thought, let me take another opinion. So the second opinion, after 2 months, some surgeon came from England, and England people, matlab, they are highly knowledgeable people. Huh? So he said, no, definitely you should get it operated. So, no, don't take it seriously. But he said, no, we used to have that foreign returned. Nowadays it's the other way, because the experience of the Indian doctor is lot more. Simply because for every one case which is seen outside, we are seeing 100. At least 10 or 20. So I was very surprised when I had gone outside and I was told, how many patients people see in a day? Well, we have an appointment for about 8 or 10. That's like, for us 8, 10 is like on the road. While going through, somebody will catch us. Somebody will say, hey, kya karna hai iska? So even, you can't see a person for an illness of which you are not a specialist. So my psychiatrist friend had come here, and he's from UK, and we used a scooter, and he came, and there the watchman, he told me, Bhaiya, I am having a pain in the throat. I said, okay. So I took a chit and wrote it. He said, can you do like this? I said, yes. He said, oh my God, we can be prosecuted for this action. Because you can't do like this. Ki on the road you see somebody, and I said, we are doing it on the house. So there are different places, people do different things. But he also advised him that you have to go in for a surgery. It's already late. If you delay much, there'll be a problem. Again, he wrote to the mother. Mother said, do as you please. He said, mother, I don't want to do as I please. You tell me what I should do. Then the mother writes, remember, it is only the grace that can cure you. Then he said, okay, I will not take anything. So after that, for 40 years, he lived normally, eventually, and died a normal death. So now she knows what is inside, brings it out. Same thing we see in the Gita, that, Shri Krishna brings out. He doesn't say, okay, take the arrow and shoot. He logically starts bringing out one layer after another, till finally Parth is ready, and he says, okay, now you do as you wish. And the end again he says that. But by then he's ready. So this is how we grow, by becoming aware of the subconscient. So it's good to reflect back and see what really was driving us. And very often the motives are mixed. There is a truth, there is a vital desire, there is something else. All these fellows come together. And the result is a hodgepodge. So, in the next passage, she reminds us, every action on earth is bound to have a good and a bad side. Don't try to, that it will always be good for everybody, good as we understand, because it's not possible. She says, you are trying something impossible. Like people say, I want others to be happy. I said, this is an impossible task. Even to stay happy yourself is not easy. Let alone making others happy. So she says every action is bound to have it. Even the actions which best express the most divine law of love carry in them something of the disorder and darkness inherent in the world as it is today. So even the best action which expresses not any other but the highest law of divine love, even when that is done, and you see there are so many, because we don't understand the workings of the way the world is. So there is the letter of, beautiful letters of Sahana. The one which I remember just now is that she went through a lot of, bleeding issues women have. And she is praying to mother to help her. And then Sri Aurobindo replies that, tell Sahana, he asked somebody else to communicate to her, tell Sahana, whatever is needed is being done for her. This little discomfort she has to go through, because it's a expelling of, or what is called as exhaustion of the last remnants of sexual desire. Now you see the divine law, and yet one has to go through a little bit passage of pain. because that's necessary for the growth and progress and for exhausting things from within nature. So, on earth, in the present state, like Mother said once, you cannot guarantee absolute protection in our present state of life upon earth. Even during, and Shobindo, before 1950, so there was somebody who's just near the vicinity of the ashram, there was a chain snatching incident. So people asked Shobindo, how can it happen? So he made it very clear that in the present state of the world, which is governed by disorder, it is not an absolute divine reign has been established upon earth and in matter. So you cannot guarantee any such things. And in the ashram context, I remember somebody telling me that there were only 3 persons to whom the mother said that they have an absolute protection given by her. To that extent, she said that if you don't ever say anything unpleasant or hurtful to this lady, there was a lady out of them, because it comes straight to me and gives me a blow. And that lady had nothing super special about her, outwardly. But there is some relation with the divine, which we don't understand. Like Shri Krishna would take everything of Arjuna on himself. But he didn't guarantee that Abhimanyu and their children and Ghatotkacha and everybody, his absolute protection will be there. No, it was only to Arjuna. So in the present state of this world, there will be certain things, even when the best law, most divine law of love, carry in them something of the disorder and darkness inherent in the world as it is today. You cannot eliminate it. So she says, because of this, people take 2 attitudes. Some people, those who are called pessimists, perceive almost exclusively the dark side of everything. So there is that WhatsApp university on which it was, see why the Mahabharata was done. So that Krishna wanted humanity to see the terrible effects of war. My God. To destroy so much and say, see, this is what war does. To start with, it is his war. So this is the pessimist trying to see something good and justifying. But that was not the purpose of the war. The Shobindo says very beautifully, it is through the Mahabharata and the bloodshed there that Shri Krishna saved India. Otherwise, India would have been, we can't imagine where. Because he established a kingdom of Dharma which for next 2500 years or more continued to be guarded by great kings because of the energy that had gone into it. It's much later that, the attacks took place. So she says that there are these pessimists who perceive almost exclusively the dark side of everything. The optimists, on the other hand, see only the side of beauty and harmony. So what is the attitude one should take? She says, and if it is foolish and ignorant to be an unwitting optimist, by that she means that everything will be a miracle, everything will be wonderful, then people suddenly find it a shock. Like somebody wrote that, how come somebody died of corona in the ashram? This is what is called as expecting an impossible miracle. That nothing will happen to anybody ever after once you have enrolled your name in the book of the elite. It doesn't work like that. So this is what is called as because there are conditions. Now to some people, divine may completely override those conditions. To some others, for a certain purpose, he may allow them to go through certain things. It doesn't work like mathematics. So she says, and if it is foolish and ignorant to be an unwitting optimist, is it not making a happy conquest to become a willing optimist? Well, things may happen, but yet you must be always full of hope. So she distinguishes between foolish and unwitting optimist. It is like some people start believing in almost superstitiously in all kinds of miracles. So people even stick mothers, sometimes symbol here, there, everywhere. That, now my scooter is safe. Even if I close my eyes and am drunken state, it is safe. Why? Because symbol is there. So this is called being foolish and unwitting optimist. And yet we do not know that if something happens, he may be saved. Actually saved. Situation could be much worse and this may bring him out in a much faster way. So she says that you should be a willing optimist. Willing optimist is somebody who does his best. He's not foolish and unwitting optimist. He is willing. He wants to do his bit. At the same time, he believes that ultimately good will come out of whatever may happen. And its classic example is Sri Aurobindo's letter to Mrilalini Devi. When her brother dies, actually, I think one more had died or two more had died before, and then the third one also dies with the second one, and she's obviously in pain, and she writes to Sri Aurobindo, and he consoles her, and in that he says something very beautiful. He says, after all in this world, very often God brings good out of evil. What a willing optimist, that yes, it is something which is painful. It should not happen, untimely death. But he says, God often brings good out of evil. So look at that good which will emerge through all this. In the eyes of pessimists, whatever one does will always be bad, ignorant, or egoistic. How could one satisfy them? It is an impossible task. So this is how sometimes people come to the ashram. They meet some of us and they are very dissatisfied, unhappy, because they are expecting I don't know what. Some Babajis will say, okay, tomorrow morning you come, we'll have a mantram, homam in the morning, and they see people, regular people, or sometimes people who can suddenly even like Durvasa, get. So they don't understand. So they go back and they see this side. So, because being in touch, sometimes they write to me. So I said, you went to ashram to see people or you went to ashram to see Mother and Sri Aurobindo? I said, look at the same phenomena and look at the love of Mother and Sri Aurobindo that has embraced all kinds of people. Oh, we didn't look at it like that. I said, see, what a tremendous love that she has embraced all kinds of humanity and brought them together close to her heart, because she alone can change it. After all, where do you expect the worst illness cases where there is the best topmost doctors? If you go to a topmost hospital and everything is announced, but cases don't go there, they go somewhere else. So you will say, it looks like only a namesake place. So it is a way of looking at it. She is asking us to become willing optimists rather than pessimists who will always see the dark side of things. So she says, you can't convince a pessimist because he is bound to see in everything. Like people, when they read the Gita, they say, oh, sure, Krishna is speaking egoistically. Aham tva sarva papebhyo. So you have to explain to them, aham is only a figure of speech. It means I. It doesn't mean egoism. Even divine has to say I. What does he say? My soul or my Paramatma or Paramatma, it look very odd. So he has to use the word I. It is the meaning you put in the word I. So the Sri Krishna who is standing on the battlefield and saying Aham tva sarva papebhyo mukshishami masucha, he is in a superconscient state. He is identified with the Purushottama and he is speaking that. But a pessimist, he will always see in it something ignorant or egoistic. So she says you cannot just satisfy them, it is an impossible task. Meaning thereby don't try to convince the pessimist, but for yourself become a willing optimist. This is the take home point. Then there is another passage where she says there is only one recourse. So what we should do, Mother? There is only one recourse. To unite as perfectly as possible with the highest and purest light that one can conceive. This highest and purest life changes as we grow. To begin with, it may be the spirit of sacrifice. Then it could be expression of the divine will or that perfect consciousness, whatever it be. Or non-injury, it could be anything, the highest light that one can conceive. She says, find that and act according to that. To identify one's consciousness as completely as possible with the absolute consciousness. That is the perfect, that's where she starts from. So at least even if we are not able to identify, we strain ourselves. I want to know your will. Very often people say, but I don't get to know. Doesn't matter. You have put in, every effort that we have made. We have actually strained ourselves a little and the consciousness begins to become loose on different, heart fixed locations. And one day the divine will begins to express itself. So we still should strive and we still should try, because this exercise itself makes it possible one day to come in contact and eventually to unite with the absolute consciousness. to strive to receive all inspirations from that consciousness alone. We should strive. It may or may not happen, or it may happen in degrees and steps and stages. So strive, we should strive always to offer a thing to Mother and try it. It will slowly, step by step, one day all that we do will be a result of that inspiration from that consciousness alone. So as to foster as best one can its manifestation upon earth. So you see, it's always a gradation. Very often, people take this approach of none or all. So they say, I can't meditate. Or they say, when meditation becomes deep, yes, I can meditate. But there are many steps. There are people who sit for months and they cannot meditate. Then they sit for another few months and they start feeling that, yes, abhi dhyan thoda lag jata hai. Mind is a little less restless. Then they sit for a few more months and they say, oh, I feel a nice, peaceful feeling as if I am going inside. Then they sit for some more time. They have some experience. The peace tends to stay for longer. Then they say, okay, now that peace can remain much longer. So this is how there is a gradation. So one strives and slowly one arrives. And what should be our aspiration when we are turning to the divine to arrive, to receive all inspiration, so as to foster as best one can its manifestation upon earth. It may be good for us outwardly, apparently. It may not be good for us, apparently. It may be good for another person, apparently. It may not be good for another person, apparently. But what is important is the divine manifestation. That's what we should aspire for. And trusting in its power to regard all events with serenity. What a perfect program she has given. So, it may not immediately appear. So, she has told us to be willing optimists. It may not appear as we had expected or as we wanted. So, it means that there were expectations within our nature. So, we have to work upon them. There were certain desires, wants, and yet we aspire to receive inspiration so that the divine manifestation takes place beautifully, and for that we have to trust in the power. And then all events are regarded with serenity. Why serenity? Because we know whatever it may look at right now, its inevitable result will be good. That's what trust means. It may not look the best right now, and yet best will come out of it, because at every step one is invoking the divine. Then comes the fifth passage. Since everything is necessarily mixed in the present manifestation. She says that everything is mixed because in the human consciousness, simultaneously, a divine impulsion may be mixed with desire. It's a very strange thing. And it's so true. And the mother gives this example that there is a divine will that this should happen, but desire tends to slightly distort it. Though desire is also wanting the same thing, but it has brought in its element of distortion. So maybe the divine will may have expressed itself in a very beautiful, harmonious way, but this element of desire, haste, impatience tends to bring that little distortion. So she says that since everything is necessarily mixed in the present manifestation, the wisest thing is to do one's best. And one's best is for each one to see. Certainly, desire is not the best, for sure. Egoism, selfishness are not the best. The best for most human beings is either a rational standpoint as to what is really good, what is the highest, whatever one can conceive at that given point of time. It may not be the ultimate truth, but it's one's own best or an ideal one has taken up. The wisest thing is to do one's best, striving towards an ever higher light. So many actions are not one day it is over, it continues. So keep on striving towards a higher and higher light, and to resign oneself to the fact that absolute perfection is for the moment unrealizable. So if you try to otherwise, you will end up being in a state of constant misery. So what is given to us is to constantly strive towards a greater and greater light. See how beautifully she is explaining to us the way of yoga and action. It's not like people often, okay, I don't know whether this action is in union with the divine will or not. Of course, it's not easy. So what does one do? One does one's best, but knows that it is a relative best. And that best is offered at the divine feet, not for my success or somebody else's, but so that your will is done, your manifestation takes place, which I don't know what it is. But I must do my best and to give it to the divine. And then to strive that one day one should be completely moved by the divine will, which is a process. So she is explaining to us all these things, and not to take any result as this, oh, this was the perfect expression of the truth. It may not be. It will be mixed, because absolute perfection is for the moment unrealizable. And yet, toward the end she says, and yet, how ardently must we always aspire for that inaccessible perfection. What a beautiful program she has given, step by step. Knowing that yes, it is not the very best that should have. Somebody asked the mother that, is it always the best that happens in the world? She said, if it were so, then there would be no need for yoga, no need to bring down a higher truth. She says, what is true is that whatever has happened had to happen. That's true. But she says the best happens only to those who are in that state of the best attitude, right attitude. It's not that automatically everything that happens for the best. But it is true that out of the worst, the divine brings out the best. That's a different thing altogether. So she says whatever happens is best only from a certain relative standpoint. It could have been better. So with that attitude, to always strive to correct one's attitude, not to be a pessimist who is only seeing the dark side, to become a willing optimist, to act in one's highest light that is available, and know that, and not to feign that, oh, I am being guided by the divine will. A lot of people get into that state. Oh, I am being guided by the divine will. And in the process, they create more confusion in the world. So, knowing that there are natural limitations of a human being, to strive to act according to one's best, offer that action to the Divine Mother so that her manifestation takes place in the end, and still to keep striving so that one day one can receive the right inspiration at the right moment and express it in the most beautiful divine way. So this is the path of Karma Yoga which the Mother reveals to us. And I find these prayers more complete, frankly speaking, than all the yogic texts, because it's so practical. She's not even asked us, practice this, next this, next this. She's saying act in your own highest and best. That's available to man. What is the highest ideal one has? It could be an ideal, doesn't matter. So, it's a beautiful prayer guiding us to divine action.